If you made it this far in this video, you are entitled to hear the final reports from the Maryland State Department of Education and any other reports that I have. So allegation number 1, development of the student IEP. This was based on the fact that the functional behavior assessment was not completed in May 2022. Instead, it was completed 1 year later in May 2023. So the state found this to be a violation. Allegation number 4, provision of the IEP document 5 days after the meeting. This was found to be a violation, the same as on my son's, because I did not receive a copy of the IEP within 5 days after that final IEP meeting. There was also another allegation regarding disciplinary action that was taken by Howard High School that had no IEP, therefore no modifications were made regarding the disciplinary action that was made. But believe it or not, that was found not to be a violation. Should have been, but it wasn't. But most importantly is allegation number 7. Now, I put my glasses on for this one. So allegation number 7 addresses teacher access to IEP at the beginning of the 2022-2023 school year. It states here that there was documentation from the neighborhood high school that Howard County had ensured that some staff working with the student were provided with copies of the IEP. The documentation does not, however, indicate which staff received the IEP. It also goes on to say that there was documentation that a staff at Howard High School supported my daughter and participated in the IEP meeting discussions related to her social, emotional, and behavioral needs. I'm not really understanding. I'm not 100% clear on who the staff was that they're talking about. Was it the counselor? Now, I know that the counselor and the school psychologist both attended the IEP meetings, but neither one of them had a copy of the IEPs. I am just not clear about this because if we're talking about that same phantom staff, Miss Barbara Baker, who they're claiming was working with my daughter behind the scenes, because if this were the case and this particular staff said that she provided all of my daughter's teachers a copy of the IEP, then why was there no access? And why is this considered to be a violation? So moving on, Howard County acknowledged that there was no documentation that the students' teachers had access to the IEP at the start of the 22-23 school year. So the most important section here is the discussion and conclusion. And listen carefully. Listen carefully. In this section, it's stating that Howard County did not ensure that the students' teachers had access to the students' IEP during the 22-23 school year, and this resulted in the support and services not being provided in accordance with 34 CFR 300.101 and .323. Therefore, this was a violation. However, notwithstanding this violation, MSDE finds that there is documentation that staff were aware of the behavioral needs of the student and the supports to be provided to her despite the absence of documentation that they had access to the student's IEP. Therefore, no student-specific corrective action is necessary to address this violation. I thought that was pretty interesting that Howard County acknowledged its faults and that there was no documentation supporting the fact that the teachers had a copy of the IEP, but somebody had it. We just don't know who, but somebody had it. I am not sure how it is even relevant. Maybe the state forgot that they documented that teachers not having access to my daughter's IEP resulted in her not receiving the supports and services that she was entitled to. Okay. So most importantly, under the student-specific requirements, it states that MSDE, Maryland State Department of Education, requires that Howard County provide documentation by October 1st, 2023 of the following actions. And the most important action here is the third one, which is here. By October 1st, 2023, the IEP team had to meet to determine whether the delay in completing and reviewing the functional behavior assessment that was recommended on May 10th, 2022, had a negative impact on the student's ability to benefit from the educational program. If it's determined that there was a negative impact, the amount and nature of compensatory services or other remedy to redress the violation and develop a plan for the provision of those services, at least within a year of the date of this letter of findings. So the interesting part here is Howard County had to determine whether completing and reviewing the FBA from May 2022 had a significant impact on my daughter. Now, maybe it's me, but I don't know how you can determine something from a year prior based on an FBA that was done a year later. So the decision was made based on Miss Augustine's fake FBA that no impact occurred from 2022. I mean, we can't go back to 2022 and figure out what her needs were at that time. We literally can't go back in time. None of us. I mean, we're human. So based on the fact that we can't go back, you would think the state would not have even said any such thing. So therefore, those compensatory services should have been granted because she did not receive those services, but it was not. So in late September, I submitted a complaint to the Maryland State Department of Education regarding this and the fact that, those services should have been granted to her. Basically, what I was informed in this letter was that I had missed the timeline. So basically, it was saying that my daughter graduated in the spring of 2023 with a diploma from Howard County Public Schools, and most of my concerns that I raised in my complaint were investigated in a previous complaint. The sole allegation that MSDE can investigate at this time is whether the Howard County Public School System followed proper procedures in determining compensatory services on February 20th, 2024, in accordance with 34 CFR 300.101. So the problem I have with this is Howard County did not comply. We did not meet by October 1st, 2023, which was required by the Maryland State Department of Education. So now I'm outside of the timeline because Howard County did not meet on time. I mean, it says right here, 2024, and their requirement of Howard County was to meet by October 1st, 2023. Well, I submitted my complaint regarding this before October 1st, 2023. And I'm considered to be outside of the timeline. And this was written by Ms. Barnett, who is the Chief Family Support and Dispute Resolution Branch Division of Early Intervention and Special Education Services. So she goes on to say that she understands that I may not agree with the outcome of the compensatory services for my daughter. However, I am incorrect regarding that IDEA mandates provision of compensatory services. In fact, IDEA does not mention compensatory services at all. And that compensatory services is really more of an equitable remedy that comes from litigation. Now, we weren't in litigation in the midst of my son's IEP meeting, and I was told by Ms. Gunshore, oh, he'll just get compensatory services. I'm not quite sure how litigation has anything to do with this and how that's even okay. And it goes on to say that there had to be other relevant information to determine whether my daughter would be eligible. How about the fact that she was assaulted? How about the fact that she was being accused of cutting classes? And this was what was documented in her record. However, it was mainly because the school had no IEP on file to know that she was eligible to have a flash pass. So technically, it really wasn't skipping classes. Also, my daughter and I ended up in juvenile court filing a peace order against a student who had assaulted her. So all of these things, I provided them all of the information, every single thing, every single piece of documentation. But that wasn't enough. I told them about the risky behaviors that she was experiencing and all of these different things. That wasn't enough. If that weren't enough, then I should have been told, well, this wasn't enough at that time. But no one said anything like that to me. So in conclusion, Ms. Barnett states that Howard County IEP team determined that there was no negative impact from May 2022. But again, how do we go back to May 2022? How do you know that for sure? So these compensatory services should have been granted to her regardless. She also makes it clear that MSD would not overturn that decision and only investigate the process through which the decision was made. And I mentioned the process. The process was fake. It was not a real FBA because it was not on an official Howard County form, and it did not have all of the documentation included in it, and it did not have any documentation included from me. This was in my complaint. However, that portion was not addressed. So the last complaint that I want to mention is my complaint to the U.S. Department of Education.